Hi, this is Cheryl St.Pierre of Majestic Wire Artworks. In this video, I want to teach you how to make this woven and swirl pendant. This was one of my first prototypes for it, and I wasn't happy with how the beads on the side didn't quite line up. And I mean, I didn't have a technique developed for wrapping the side beads, but with this one I came up with an idea and it worked. So that's what I'm going to show you. That's part of this video, and hopefully we can make another one that looks very much like this, if not exact. So I will be checking on this one how I did it, just to double check, because I'm trying to duplicate this as best we can. And so let's begin. I wanted to discuss the beads. With this one I used a 12mm bead, and this one I used a 14mm bead, and the size difference of the pendant is quite amazing. This pendant is 1 1/4 by 1 inch, I believe, and this one's this is 1 1/3 by 1 inch, and this is 1 1/2 by 1 inch. So it really isn't that much bigger, but the optical illusion of it is. I'm not sure what made the difference. So anyways, let's begin. For supplies, you'll need 3 pieces of 20 gauge wire, and let's make that it's 16 inches long. I tried 14 inches long and it was just a little bit short, and I want you to have a little bit of leeway, so 16 inches long, excuse me, and 28 gauge for your weaving wire, and that you will need, it depends on if you make a larger bead, you'll need to maybe have a little bit more, but I'm giving you 4 feet. You could probably get away with 3.5, but 4 feet gives you a little bit of extra length to hang on to. If you're using sterling silver, you might want to go with 3.5 feet of that. And again, I'll have metric in the description. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the weave, because that's what we're going to start with. And so if you're practicing the weave first, just take some 3 5-inch pieces of wire, 20 gauge wire, and then your weaving wire. You could get away with, excuse me, about 8 inches, 10 inches of the weaving wire, just to do a practice. So that's what we're doing here. So what I want you to do, we're going to lasso it in, and if you're doing starting on your 16-inch pieces, we want 1.5 inches of weaving. And so give yourself about 2.5 inches in from the right hand side of your wires to give you that room for the weave, because we're going to start on the left and work to the right. Okay, so first thing I want you to do is wrap around your first wire and cinch it together, and then introduce your next wire. And I always give myself a little bit, I do it a step. I do the next one a little bit longer, so it's easy to identify which wire belongs where. Okay, so I want you to wrap around that wire, come up in between like that, and then introduce your last wire. And what the lassoing does is it's holding it into place. Everybody has their own method of holding their wires together, and this is mine, and it doesn't take anything much extra, but once it's like that, it holds it pretty good for you, and then it's not so straining on your hand when you do the work. Okay, so now we're going to start the weave, and this is like the basket weave. Okay, so we're at the bottom, we're going to come up to the top, all underneath all 3 wires, and then we're going to wrap around the top wire. So we're going to go down between the top 2 wires. Okay, and now we're up at the top again, and we're going to come over 2 wires and go down. between the bottom two. Now we're going to come up between the top two, and we're going to go over top of the bottom two wires. And we're going to come up now between the bottom two wires, and then it's going to make it look like it's wrapping around just the bottom wire by itself. That is one pattern, and we'll continue doing the exact same thing over and over and over to make the basket weave look. Now I'm going to talk about technique. So we're going up underneath all three wires, and we're holding the wire tight, and you're making the bend, and you're going to let go and leave the tension, because otherwise it's going to be too tight, and we don't want it too tight, because then your core wires, base wires, whatever you want to call them, end up getting bent up, and we don't want to do that. Okay, so now we're going underneath the top wire, coming from the top again, and now we're going to go over top of the top two wires and come up between the top two wires, and now we're going over top of the bottom two wires, up between the bottom two wires, and then around just the bottom wire. So you're wrapping once around the top wire, then once around the top two wires, then once around the bottom two wires, then once around the bottom wire. That's the basic of it. So I'm going to do it again. So I always bend to the bend and do another bend, and the bend holds the wire in place and keeps the back neat. And the benefit of this weave is really it has two looks. Okay, the one side is the basket weave, and then when you flip it over, it's very pretty as well, but you need to keep it neat and your tension right in order to get the look. Okay, so another thing I need to mention is you don't want to go any more than 4 patterns before compressing it. Whoops, I'm out of seam there. Okay, and you're going to do that every 3 or 4 patterns, because if you don't, then they're not going to compress very neatly. And I have my weaving done here ahead of time. Every once in a while it gets away on you, and it makes it'll make a little bit of a mess. If you're doing really well, you'll have it really neat, so it looks like that, and then you could use that side to make something. It's beautiful. It's very different, but we're going to be using the weaving part. But when you don't compress properly, it's gonna show flaws. But what's forgiving about this piece of jewelry we're making is we're going to curve it, and it really sometimes straightens out anything that's a little bit off. Okay, so the next step is, well, you started about 3.5 inches. I think I started 4 inches from the right end, and I did see I have graduated ends, and this measures, it's all been compressed, and it's been measures about 1.5 inches. And now I'm going to flip it over like this, so that's the left side. I want you to trim your wires out of the way on that's your working wire. That's going to be long. I want you to trim it about 1/2 inch just to keep it out of your way. And the other tail, we're not going to trim it quite yet. We're going to put the bead on first, because we don't want you to poke yourself with the wire. So we're going to take this top wire and bend it straight up, and we're going to put the bead on that. And we don't want to bend it any more than that, because if we're going to make the bail first, and we don't want this wire getting in our way of making the bail. So you're going to grab your big bead, whichever pretty bead you have. Now this bead that I have, I ran across them on eBay, and I've never seen anything like this before. It's so pretty. It's obviously a lampwork bead, and it's got light blue, almost a periwinkle little things in it, and then it's also got like gold stone in places melted into it. So, and it just gives this beautiful effect. And for accent beads, I'm using clear bicones with my turquoise one. I just matched turquoise with it. So there it is. And I could have done blue accent beads with this. This is the proper way it sits. But it just took away from the bead. I want the bead to show off. What I want the bicones to do is just to give some glitz. And I also want to mention something. Got my camera a little bit different. This is the second time I'm making this video. I did the video first with this one, but my camera shut itself off. And I'm thinking it's my clamp that holds my phone is pushing on the button. So I've got it so my clamp is holding it on the other end of my phone. Hopefully that'll make a difference. But my pause button is very hard to get a hold of. So if it takes me a while to press my pause, please forgive me. Just wanted you to be aware of that. Okay, so here we are back again. So you've got your weaving to the left and the top wire bent up. It used to be your bottom wire. It's top wire now. And you're going to put your bead on, whether it's 12 millimeter, 4 millimeter, whichever. You know, it could be a lampwork bead that's round, or excuse me, a gemstone bead, 12 millimeter, 14 millimeter, 16 millimeter. You could try a larger bead than that, but you would probably need more weaving. It's totally doable, and it just would maybe rock against the chest a little bit with a larger bead. So I like the 14 millimeter. I think it has a nice look to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the bail. We need a long neck because it's going to have, on this one, I had 8 wraps, and it used it all up because a lot of wires being wrapped around it. So you need a really lengthy neck, so at least 8 wraps. And that is hard to judge. Just do your best. So I've got my plier like this, and I'm giving it so it's going to be more than double what you normally do. Okay, so and then to make the bail, I'm pushing the wire away from me, and I'm going to take and wrap 2 wraps around the largest part of my pliers that I can. If you've got a bail making plier, go ahead and use that. I'm sure you do anyways if you've got it. I have one, and I just don't ever think to use it. I don't like my bail that big. I don't like it when my chains fall out of my necklace. I like the chain to stay in. Okay, so it moved on me, and it was longer than I wanted to, so I'm just bending it back down like that. It's totally adjustable. And now I'm going to wrap around the stem as neat as possible. It's harder to do in an awkward situation like this. Also, because of the camera, it makes it harder for me. So I'm going to do a couple of wraps, and then I'm going to tighten it up. You might have to too. Start with that. I'm going to cinch it up with the plier. And I'm just going to straighten out my loops in case I bent them. I'm not sure if I did, but just want to do that. Okay. Oh, they're still not cinched up properly. Okay, now I'm going to keep doing the wraps a couple at a time, cinching it up just because I'm at an awkward angle. You might be lucky and not have that. Have that problem, I mean. There. Now, I'm mainly doing it nice and tight for strength. It's going to be hidden, so if it's a little messy, no worries. And it's really giving me grief. My last one wasn't as bad as this, but so how many wraps do I have now? I've got 7. And I know that 8 could fit in there, except for the fact that I've got a little bit of a space there. And I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to straighten it out. And now, this is the front. And we're going to pick whichever side of the top of the bail looks the nicest. And it kind of bent on me. I'm going to straighten it up. Remember, things like that are flexible. Okay, so that's not too bad. And that one looks a little bit better. Just gonna, like that. And now I'm gonna flip it. This is the front, and the side I want is at the back. I'm just gonna twist it around like that. And if it needs more twisting later, that's okay. And I want this wire to be on the right hand side now, because I want to wrap this weave around, and it would be in my way if it was there. And we'll move it back later. Okay. So the next thing, that at this point, we can snip off this wire, that's weaving wire completely, and give it a pinch in. I'm sure it's going to be covered, but just in case. Crimp it in. No pokies, or if there is, it's very mild. And now we're going to hold your bead and bend this around. And it looks like you have lots of wire here. See how it's spread apart there? That was one place. I'm going to see if I can, oh, there, I got to push it in. That was one place where I didn't quite cinch it as good as I wanted. And we want the weave to lay level, so if it bends on you, just straighten it out. That one was easy to straighten out. I did it with my fingers. Sometimes you need to use your pliers. Okay, so now it's tight against the bead, and I'm holding it there, and I'm supporting the neck of the bail. Lack of wording there. And I'm bending it around. So it looks like this. And I'm bending it down. And now I'm going to trim it. See, I had just slightly over what I needed of the weave. If you've got a bigger bead, you might need to do a little bit more weaving. But, you know, I think that the 4 feet of 28 gauge will be enough for you. And you might want, if you've got a like a 20 millimeter bead, you might need an extra bead on the side, and you know, stick in another bicone, and you might need another, give yourself another 4-inch length to 20 gauge wire. So a 20 inches, it'll be probably too much, but better to have too much than too little when you're doing stuff like that. So that's only if you're using a really big, huge bead. So now I'm going to trim this off, snip it in, just so I just have enough to bend this in to touch the weave there. And I'm asked the question fairly often, are you worried about this unraveling? If it unravels, you just snip off what it does. But because it's sitting against the other weave, whatever is there before you get, once you've snipped off whatever did come off, is locked in place. And if it's sticking up too high, like mine's fairly level, but sometimes it isn't. If it's sticking up higher than this weave, just take your pliers and push it down. Just give it a push, and then it'll do what it needs to do. Okay, so the next step is to take this wire that's left over from your bail wire, so make sure you don't snip that off, and we're going to wrap around the bead. And sometimes it goes really nice and other times it doesn't. So I use like a bouncing springboard. I make a little loop. And I'm noticing that it's not wanting to cooperate too well. So I'm just going to make a loop. And then if I have to pull it to the right a little bit, it just looks totally intended. And then it, see, I had to pull it to the right, and it just looks like the loop was there. And it's more forgiving. And there. Now that loop can be bigger or smaller, higher or lower. I recommend lower rather than higher. Mine's in the middle, but I think even lower might be even prettier. So now we're going to take that wire and see how it's got the kink in there. I'm going to just straighten it out a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to take, it's the top wire of the 3. We're going to take and make a loop at the bottom, and we're going to make it go counterclockwise. So we're going to the left. Okay, so it's like this. Okay, so we want the wires flipped on me, and you know, that's okay. I'm just gonna take my shortest wire, flip it back up, so it's gonna be the top wire, and if it spreads apart, that's okay, because we want the shortest wire, which was the wire that made the bail, to do the beads, because it has the least work to do next. Okay, so these 2 are longer. We're going to leave them at the bottom. We're going to lift up the shortest one, and I actually put it underneath so it would have a better visual. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to put a bicone on it. So we're stepping right into the beads now. Okay, so you've got your bead there, you've got your 2 wires here on the right hand side of that bead, and now we're going to make a frame for that bead. And this one can be a little bit tricky, so I'm wrapping around it. Be patient with yourself, and I'm pushing up the bead. It tends to move on you, and if it does, that's okay. We just try to work it back. Okay, so I got it like that. Doesn't have to be a complete circle. It could be teardroppy shaped. Okay, so now you see the bead wants to move away. That's okay. Now I'm going to take the bead wire and I'm going to make a loop like this, and that's going to help lock that wire in place. So pretty, yes, but it's got a job to do. And now the 2 wires I'm going to take underneath that bead wire like that, see? And I'm going to flip it over like this. And now it's in position to wrap the next bead. So that's very important. We went underneath the bead wire and then up and back over. And now we're putting the next bicone on. And do the same process all over again. So I'm going to wrap around that bead. Okay, like that. And I'm going to make this loop to lock it in place. And now I'm taking the 2 wires going underneath and then over top, ready for the next bead. So in a way, it's kind of similar techniques to doing Celtic spread apart on me here, so I'm just going to fix it there. I think that works. Okay, Celtic style wrap in a way. Okay, so now it's ready for the next bead. Okay, and now I'm going to make the frame for that bead. Okay, I'm going to make the loop to lock it with the bead wire. And then I'm going to take that underneath. And I really don't need to, because now we're going to wrap that around. Okay. See, like that. Whoops. We're just shaping it to the bead. We're going to hold it in place. The bead wire now is going to go underneath the bail and then around top, and then we're going to snip it and crimp it in place there so it won't have a sharp edge anywhere. So I have lots of length left, so maybe 16 inches would be good enough for a 20 millimeter bead. You might want to practice with copper if you're going to work with silver first, just to make sure. But yeah, so this is all set up for a 14 millimeter bead. So it's got some space there. We're going to fill that up, and I'm going to be checking how I did this one. Okay, so I had this wire a little bit down lower, so I'm just going to push it down, fill it up there. And I've got this up here, and I went behind just to give it strength behind the bail like that, and then see how it filled it up there a little bit. Now I'm going to do a loop in front of the bail. So it looks like that, and then I took the ends. Let's move this so it stays in focus. Now I'm going to tuck the ends down in here like this, and I have to pull. I'm going to pull them with the pliers. So I've got it tucked in there, and now I'm just going to with the pliers pull one wire at a time carefully, because we don't want it to kink. And if you have to, well, maybe I'll use my fingers. Gradually do it. Don't want to wreck the wires. Got to work slowly. There. Now I've got them in there. They're quite kinked up. And I'm going to just straighten them a little bit. Not work them too much. Just gently straighten them a little bit. Okay? And then we're going to add some more body and shape by doing a swirl underneath here. Okay, so we're going to make that. We want that wire to show a little bit. I'm going to do, because I got my kinks, this one I did just one swirl. It was nice and smooth for me, but I've got kinks, so I'm going to do 2 swirls with this behind the scenes here. Swirls. And then it can stick out on the side a little bit. See, like that. Because we want it to poke out just a little bit, just to give more body. And I'm pushing this in a little bit closer to the bead. Okay, sticking up a little bit. The more you work it, the stronger it gets too. Okay, and then the next step was to come up. How did we do that? Yes, we came, now we're bending it around, and now we're going to come up this hole right here. Okay. that in place there. So it's showing there. It's in focus for you. Okay, and I'm bending it this way, so it's folded over. And now I want to do another loop. So I've got, see how it's folded over here? And now I want to do another loop. Okay, so I've got it here, and I'm doing another counterclockwise loop. So it kind of matches the other one. And now I'm going to go underneath, so it's smaller, kind of an echo of the other one. And I'm going to go underneath, bend it, I'm holding it in place, so I'm supporting it and bending it. This is the back now. And now I'm going to snip it and tuck in the end in there. So I'm giving myself a little bit of length to work with. We'll see, I ended up not having very much left over. So if you have a 20mm bead and you're going to do 4 bicones, yeah, do your 20 inches of there. Chuck it in so it touches the other wires, and now it's locked in place. And now I'm going to just push it in where I think it needs to be squished in, just to adjust. Okay, and it's done, and there it is. So there's the back. Even the back is pretty. There you go. Thank you for joining me in this woven and swirled pendant. It's beautiful. And my craft along group, this isn't the craft along project, but I intend to share these special beads. For people that are asking where I found them on eBay. I'll probably never find anything like this again. So, I mean, it's just, that's what you do. You look and you find a treasure, and sometimes you can never get them again. But I'm going to share with my craft along group. Okay, thank you for joining me. God bless. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.